What's up, y'all? And welcome to another alternative factuals video. And as I'm pretty sure you can tell by the title, we're going to be talking about Cloak and Dagger season 2 episodes 1 and 2, but more specifically about Mayhem and Detective Bridget O'Reilly. But before I get into anything deeper, please be sure to like, share, and of course subscribe, and let me know any comments or any theories you have about the show in general. And just keep the topics coming. Let me know what you think about these episodes and videos and all that stuff. And without further ado, let's kind of jump into it. So as we already know, like the majority of like the whole marketing for Cloak and Dagger, the second season mostly has revolved around the whole thing about Mayhem being the antagonist. And we already saw that in season 1 that she was exposed to the chemicals when she got shot, and pretty much it was dumped into the water after Connors, I believe, shot her, if I remember correctly. But here's the interesting part. Now we get to season 2, and the first 2 episodes, they kind of jump right into what we've kind of been missing within, like, I guess the first month or so. Maybe it's been a couple weeks, but you can tell that some sort of time has passed. So one thing we can say about Detective Bridget O'Reilly, or Mayhem, or whatever you want to call it, is that for the 2-hour runtime, it seemed like Bridget was kind of dealing with multiple personality disorder. And that's really when someone is dealing with more than one personalities in their bodies, kind of dominating or fighting for control of a single being. And it seemed that way at first, and honestly, I would have been on board with that kind of go about the character, where you have the regular Detective Bridget O'Reilly who wants to do the right thing, but then you also have Mayhem who wants to take over during a certain point in time just to kind of correct things. But when we get to the second episode, we find out one of the biggest plot twists that even I didn't predict, and I give credit to the show for doing, is that Bridget O'Reilly and Mayhem are actually 2 separate people. And obviously it's a lot early in the series to give an official reason, and the show hasn't given that a reason as of yet, because obviously that was within the second episode and within the last literally like minute. But in the final moments, we see that yes, they're 2 separate people after Tyrone found the real Bridget, or the non-Mayhem version of Bridget, tied up in her apartment. Then he teleported the 2 of them to Tandy, who was actually with Mayhem, to stop this human trafficking ring that was starting to kind of be revealed on TV screen, with the ambulance, or the private ambulance that was actually with Tandy when she stopped him with her light blast. Now with Bridget and Mayhem kind of meeting face to face for the first time, it kind of shows that whatever happened at the end of season 1 somehow created 2 separate beings of personalities from a single person. And there's nothing really to tell what's going to happen, because this honestly has never happened in the comic book adaptation, which is a really rare thing to pretty much find in a TV show at all, usually to kind of take something that was usually pretty specific and then take a whole liberty about it that never even kind of sort of happened. But here's something we can kind of go on based on what we've seen in Marvel Comics and what we can kind of explore going forward, in order to try and figure out why her personality seems to have taken a whole separate form in itself. Now what I'm predicting is happening in terms of why they have 2 separate bodies is simply the fact that Mayhem is a part of Bridget O'Reilly that has been kind of buried beneath the surface, where it's kind of like one of those situations like the Incredible Hulk, or even Onslaught, for example. Now for those of you who've not read Marvel Comics or don't really know much about the Onslaught saga in Marvel Comics, this is a point in time in when I believe Professor Xavier actually created this sentient psionic entity from the consciousness of himself and Magneto, and this was during the battle of the X-Men with Magneto's acolytes, or people who were his followers. And this is also the same story where he ripped the adamantium from Wolverine's skeleton, which was intense and crazy in comics. But this took place because Xavier was so unhinged with anger and over the brutality of Magneto's assault against Wolverine that he used his telepathic powers to shut down the mind of Magneto and basically turned him into a vegetable. And during this kind of psionic or telepathic exchange, Magneto's anger, grief, and his hatred for humanity kind of entered Xavier's mind, and then it suppressed and kind of mingled with the negative feelings that Xavier had endured throughout the course of his life, and then formed this being called Onslaught. Now, even though this was an amalgamation of Charles Xavier and Magneto, that is still 2 forms of psychic energy, or 2 personalities, or 2 aspects of 2 separate personalities that came together and formed its own entity in its own right. So based on the knowledge we know from like situations like that took place in Marvel Comics, if I remember correctly, I think that was X-Men Volume 2, number 53, June 1996. But I think that's because that's one of the ones that I really like, actually enjoyed. So like I know dates when it comes to very specific things. But besides that, Mayhem could be taking the same kind of origin story as like Onslaught, for example, where Bridget O'Reilly naturally, even in the first, well, not the first episode, but the second episode, when they introduce her when she's at the bar, Mayhem says something specific where you're still a scared young girl pretending to be a cop, pretending to be brave. Well, guess what? It's my turn. So it kind of worked as a split personality before we realized they were two separate beings. But what I understand is that Bridget O'Reilly has always been someone who wanted to do the right thing, and she's always kind of been scared. She didn't really know what exactly to do, even though she had the best of intentions. So there was a part of her, I guess, in her subconscious that really was tired of her being weak, tired of her being scared, tired of her just not knowing what to do with herself. So I guess during the ending of season 1, when she got exposed to those chemicals in the water, it separated those two amalgamations of her mind. You basically have the dominant Bridget O'Reilly, or the O'Reilly that we've seen from the first season, and basically the Bridget O'Reilly that has always existed since the day that she was born. And then you have the subconscious Bridget O'Reilly, which is now Mayhem, part of her that wants to kind of protect her in some way, shape, or form, but also the part of her that is tired of the weak side of her, the dominant side of her. And this kind of goes back to a lot of what people say about human beings as a whole, where you have a very dominant personality, the part of you that is there on a regular day, that's there when you go shopping, or when you talk with people, or when you go to work. But then you have parts of you that are not really surfacing only unless it's during dire circumstances. Parts of you that are dormant, that are meant to kind of keep these mental kind of blocks from keeping you from doing crazy things, like for example, like killing, for example. And people who usually suffer from like different various forms of mental illnesses and all that stuff, the reason why they usually don't have much control over certain urges is because when they suffer from mental illnesses, those parts of them are let out. And basically Mayhem is a part of Bridget O'Reilly that has been released, but now it has its own form, so it's no longer bound to a single body. Now she can go out, do whatever she wants. But even though it is a darker kind of form of Bridget O'Reilly, she still has a kind of moral code when she's going after criminals, people who are doing these sex traffic related things. Anyone who is involved in any form of the underworld, she is going to go after and she is going to kill. Instead of trying to use the justice system that the initial or the most dominant Bridget O'Reilly somehow still believes in, we have Mayhem, who no longer believes in the system, no longer believes in due process. She is the version of her that if you are caught, if you are guilty, I'm killing you. You're done for. That's it. It's over. So that's what I personally think the reason why that there's two Mayhems or two Bridget O'Reillys is just because they're basically two parts of the same person, but just giving two separate bodies in order for them to achieve two different goals, or at least the same goal, but two different ways of doing it. But you let me know down in the comments what you think about the whole splitting body theory with Detective Bridget O'Reilly. And if you're new to the comics, please, if you're new to the channel, if you're new to the channel, please be sure to like, share, and of course subscribe. And like I said, leave a comment down below. Let me know your theories and what you feel and all that stuff. And I'll catch you later on. Peace out.